Hi y'all, FirstClass 1972 signing in. Today we're going to work on a 1.6 cylinder head from a 1996 Toyota Corolla. Let's get started. Alright, so as I was working, Martin tells me that these heads over here that are off camera are ready to be calibrated. Okay, so here it felt like Martin wanted to challenge me by saying this. And I said, okay. Let's see if I finish this one fast. I can continue those over there that you were talking about. Alright guys, so I actually come to the shop once a week, twice a week if I don't finish a task on the first day. So I usually come the next day and pick up where I left off. This is so that I can get the whole process of working on the center heads. Because honestly to me, it's pointless if I don't learn the beginning to end of an assembly line. So that's why I go to the shop the next day. Plus, I love coming to the shop. At this point, it's like my second home. Like in the beginning, when I started coming to the shop, I didn't jump on engines just yet, since at the time, the shop was mostly working outside, doing diagnostics and taking motors out. So when the guys were working on cool projects, specifically Fords or Internationals, some Chevys I must say, I would show up twice a week. For example, I learned how to install exhaust pipes on a 2001 Corvette, install radiator on an International Scout, and much more. I should have started recording then, but life happens, I guess. At the time, I had my full-time job at the diesel shop, but when I had my 2 days off, I would be at the engine shop. I honestly don't know how I did that. I'm not kidding when I say I was exhausted from working my full-time job, and I still would go to the engine shop to work some more. But I guess that just shows you how committed I am. So at the time, I was barely home. This shop is the longest I've been at from all the previous shops I've been to, aside from the diesel shop. But even then, I didn't really spend time at the shop since I was mostly working at the yards. That's actually another story which I would get into some other time. So going back to the heads, there are times when I would work on the heads halfway through the process, just because someone had already jumped on it when I wasn't there. So that is why I forget some steps here and there. Which is why I have the guys looking over my shoulder to see if I'm not essentially fucking up the heads. And for that reason is why you see the guys throughout my head rebuilding process. Anyways, let's get back to this 1.6. Alright, so at this point, I started to have more confidence in my skills when cutting the valves to get the valve lash. I guess these late nights at the shop are starting to pay off. But no, really. It felt really good to see a difference from where I started to now. Alright guys, so guess what? This time around, I wasn't asking for one of the guys to confirm the valve lash measurements that I got, because I trusted my measurements, and I think the guys noticed this. Of course, I did ask some questions, but okay, let's get into it. Here, Martin tells me that I'm going to cut the valves to the specs. So the intake is 6 to 10 thousandths of an inch, and for the exhaust, you're looking at about 8 to 12 thousandths of an inch. Let's get it. He also added, so the 6 intake is a minimum, 10 being max, but you leave it in 6. And for the exhaust, the minimum is 8, so you leave it in 8. To which he asks, how much does it measure here? And I say, it has less than 6. Then he asks, where exactly are you inserting the feeler gauges? To which I demonstrate. Then he asks, it's less? And I say yes, because the 6 thousandths doesn't go in. But then he says, this one has to read 8 because it's the exhaust side. And I say, no, this is the intake side. Then he says, no, this is the exhaust side with the smaller ports. And that's when I tell him, this is the intake side that I'm working on right now. And he says, are you sure? And I say, yes. So then he follows up with, So the intake is not the exhaust side? And I say, no, this is the exhaust side. And he's like, really? And I say, yes, because the smaller valves are the exhaust. So then he says, so that means they need to measure 10 minimum. Here, check the valves to see how much they measure. Alright, so at this point, I low-key started to question myself because he has more experience than me when it comes to the heads. Anyways, but before I go ahead and start cutting away at these valves, I needed confirmation, and so I asked him to see if he finally agrees with me. And then he says, wait, let me go ask Christian. Oh my god. Alright, so I called it. It was actually the intake side because I knew that these ports were bigger than the other side, which confirms that I was right. That's what's up. Alright, so here one of the guys comes up and asks me, are you going easy on that? And I say, yeah, yeah, yeah. And he's like, I see that we got most of one side done. And I say, yes. Alright, and then he says, okay, I've seen you've done the intake already. Yeah, because I have to finish it today and send it over today. And then I ask, today? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then he says, so yeah, do the adjustment and we'll put it back together so I can send it out. Alright guys, pressure's on. Okay. So from here, I noticed at the 4,000th of an inch, it goes in smoothly. So what I like to do, because our limit is 6,000th of an inch, so you can start off by smaller numbers and then you can estimate how much you need to cut on the grinder in order to see how much you need to get to 6,000th of an inch. I like to ease my way in because you can cut metal, but you can't add metal. So unless if you have new valves laying around, but you want to pretend you don't have an extra valve, you know? So yeah, let's try the 5,000th of an inch. Yeah, so it's not going in. So we're gonna go ahead and grind off some material. I always get kind of nervous towards the end because I don't want to cut too much, you know what I mean? What do you know? The 6,000th of an inch is going in. So now let's try 7,000th of an inch. I used to get a little cocky in the beginning when I first started doing this, and I would just cut off way too much. But now it's like, it helps when you start off by the smaller numbers and then you work your way up. Because like I said, you can always estimate of how much you're cutting. So that's a 6,000th of an inch. Then we have the last one, which let's measure it. I did it off camera, but it doesn't meet the 6,000th of an inch. So now let's get back to the grinder. Alright, hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing. So I like to start off because I already have an idea of how much I was cutting earlier. So I'm gonna go 6 rounds and just ease my way in after. Alright, let's check if the 6 cuts did anything. Also, make sure when you're measuring them, like putting in the feeler gauge, you want to like push in the valve. I'll show you guys right now like on the other side. So just hold it down with one hand, put pressure on it, and at the same time put in the feeler gauge. So you don't have to force it, you just need to slide it in. If it doesn't go in smoothly, then you know it's not going to go in. So going back to the grinder. Oh, you guys hear that sound? I don't know, every time the airplanes pass by, I don't know, it's like fucking crazy. I mean, 5,000 an inch is going in, it's hardly going in. He's still like, it doesn't go in smoothly, but he kind of goes in. So now, we know we're getting close to the cut that we want. So that should be the last cut. See, now the 6 actually goes in smoothly. And that's actually pretty good because the 7,000 of an inch is not going in, which is perfect because we're trying to get the 6,000 of an inch. So we can go ahead and write that down next to the cam lobe. You're pretty much done for the intake side. So now we're going to move on to the exhaust side. So same procedure, but now we're looking at the 8,000 of an inch. So just prepare the feeler gauges to what you're looking for. Sometimes you want to be careful that you don't have one feeler gauge stuck to the one that you're measuring with. I'm gonna let out like the fastest in my head I did. Okay, so once we're there, so you want them in order. So 6,000s, 7,000s, 8,000s. So we can start off with valve number 8. I'm just gonna fast forward this because you guys pretty much have like an idea how it goes. So yeah. Alright, so side note. So I noticed for these bigger valves, it's gonna take a while to cut these versus the smaller ones since it has more material. Basically, right now, they have no charge, they have no lift right now. They're like on a flat surface, I guess. They're not on top of the lobe. So I'm gonna show you guys right now. So when you're measuring out the valve lash, you want to make sure that the lobe is facing up. So you want the flat rounded surface touching a solid lifter. And then when we're checking that, I gotta make sure to put pressure on the valve when sliding in that feeler gauge. Then put the feeler gauge in the solid lifter. So this is where it's gonna get inserted, right here. So here, Martin comes up to me and asks me, "There, it's all finished?" To which I tell him, "I just need the last 2. And Martin asks, "You finished it fast, huh?" And I say, "Well, yeah, the practice, you know." And he says, "But is everything good?" And I say, "Hopefully." No, I'm just joking. So here, I started off with the 6, because your number is 8. Alright, so I start off with 2 numbers, because you want the 8. 8,000ths of an inch, that's what you're looking for. Okay, it's not going in, now we know. So let's grind off. I wanted to show you guys that the 6,000ths of an inch is going in. It's going in smoothly, so that's what you want. But we're looking for 8,000ths of an inch, so 8,000ths of an inch is not going in. 7,000ths of an inch is going in. Alright, let's do the other ones. So now I see that the 9 doesn't go in and the 8,000ths of an inch does go in. I want to say it's an 8 because I'm kind of forcing the 9. Alright. And that is how it's done. Now time to put the tools away. Alright, y'all. Thank y'all for watching. First Class 1972, signing out.